Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Neuroqueering podcast. I'm your host, Pasha Marlowe. I'm here today with a guest, Rae Nelson, and I'm excited for today and a little nervous because we're going to have a good, vulnerable conversation today about microaggressions and subtle acts of exclusion, which I've never really talked about, certainly not on this podcast. So I'm excited. Rae is a diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging leader, a public speaker, a human resources generalist, and is on a Jedi advisory board. I think Jedi is such a cool word, the justice aspects of it. So we're going to get into a good conversation today. Welcome, Rae.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm just really excited to be here, honestly.
Great. Yeah, when we met, you were saying that this work is what it fuels you. You're really passionate about it, which comes it's clear. It's very clear when talking to you. What made you so or what started this journey in wanting to delve into the world of DEIB and JEDI and all of it?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, it's been kind of a lifelong thing. I really always kind of fought for justice before even realizing what the concept was, standing up for my peers, being the loud voice when everyone was silent, that type of thing. I don't have a problem putting myself out there. So, uh, as I developed in my personal life, kind of realizing that I was kind of stifling that piece of me, becoming a little unsure of, who I was directing that information to, landing in several different leadership roles, and not really having the opportunity to focus on that.
Mm,
I worked at a call center for several years as a manager, and we had to go by the book and make sure that we were not crossing any lines or saying anything untoward. But um, I started my job here at the co-op, local co-op in Corvallis, and it really opened up the door for me to dive into this specific topic, to DEIB, and kind of taking over the Jedi group that we have here at the co-op. Um, and it's just something I'm really passionate about. I don't think people have the opportunity to voice their opinions. Not every voice is heard. So if I can be kind of the vessel for that, or the person that people can come to that voice their ideas, so I can voice them louder.
yeah, it sounds like. Have you heard the term accomplice in the DEI world? Like rather than ally, from allyship to accomplice, uh,
Yeah,
taking on that advocacy. So it feels like you've really done that for yourself. Like you've evolved from allyship to accomplice work and advocacy and putting it into action.
yeah. And also recognizing that, some people aren't comfortable being the loud one, or being on stage, or being in public, or, having a lot of eyes on you. But, I'm okay with accepting when I'm wrong, and I'm okay with learning and growing with those mistakes. And I want to do that. That's something I thrive off of. So it's exciting for me.
And have you ever felt that for you yourself, you put yourself in a position of danger, or have you ever felt unsafe doing this work and being out loud with it and being visible?
Not as much in the professional world as my personal world. Usually in a professional setting, I'm in an environment that's expected. That's what we're there for. That's what we're wanting to hear about. When I did the TEDx talk, it was a little bit off the off the topic of most of the other talks. So in that sense, it was maybe a little bit uncomfortable for a moment, but I didn't feel unsafe. I think in
Mhm.
I wouldn't mind being in those positions though, because we all have to be. Some of us have to be on the front lines, right? We have to be in those situations, and it's not something I would turn away, but it's not something I've had the opportunity to be a part of yet.
And you mentioned your TEDx talk. What was the title of your TEDx talk in case people want to look it up?
That was respecting gender identity. Gender identity matters. It was a local TEDx talk, and they cut out little bits of it, so I didn't get to, the full impact isn't on the YouTube video, but it's there. It was my kind of my first recorded public speaking event, so it was a little. I would say if it was my fifth one, I'd be disappointed, but for my first one, I'm pretty okay with the outcome.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad you did that. And everybody check that out. And also today, when we talk about microaggressions and subtle acts of exclusion, while these may be new terms for people, the idea of microaggressions and subtle acts of exclusion have been around forever. It's just now we have language for it, right?
Microaggressions was a term coined in the 70s, so
Hmm.
it's been around, but it's definitely gaining some, I guess, popularity or some visibility, definitely in the last decade or so.
Hmm. And what would you say? There's three different types, typical or three most common types of microaggressions. Is that correct?
Right, yes. So there are micro invalidations. Sorry, give me one sec here, actually. Um, there's actually a really great talk from, he is the Dr. Daryl Dwayne Sue. He's at the Teachers College at Columbia University, and he makes those points as well, talking about kind of
Hmm.
those three different types. But
Hmm.
really, it's you can break them down. They're all kind of the same realm.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, they come from the same place for the most part. Uh,
Hmm.
there are micro assaults, and so those
Hmm.
are like conscious and intentional actions or slurs. Something that somebody's doing consciously, like just common racism, right? Just blunt
Hmm.
racism. That would be a micro assault. And then there's micro invalidations. Those are communications that are a little bit more subtle. They nullify the thoughts, feelings, and reality of a person in a minority. And then there's micro insults, and these are verbal or even nonverbal communications that might subtly convey rudeness or insensitivity, or even just demean somebody's racial heritage or history or background. And those are a little less obvious and usually unconscious. People don't even realize they're doing that.
So the intention is different than the impact,
Right,
typically.
right.
And what would be an example of a microaggression, just so everyone listening has an idea of what we're talking about?
Um, I mean, even just body language can be a microaggression. You know, when somebody, and sometimes body language doesn't mean much. But if you're talking to somebody, they say something that, or you're talking to someone and you say something and they start averting their gaze, right? You might have said something that was a microaggression. Um,
Mm,
you know, paying really close attention to a feature of someone.
mm,
Saying something like, "Wow, I'm really surprised that you were able to articulate that so well." Right? If
mhm,
you don't know their entire background, history, education, then that's not something you should be surprised about based off of, you know, just appearance or the small amount of
mhm,
information you do have.
mhm. And what about, I'm thinking on a day-to-day basis, changing sides of the street if you see
Yeah.
somebody of a different race, or um what I'm thinking about in terms of being queer,
Mhm.
when I see, like a green flag would be somebody who's hanging up a pride flag, but if I saw like a Make America Great hat again, I might feel unsafe as a queer person stepping into that space or having a conversation with that. Would that be considered a microaggression?
Yeah, absolutely. You're basing an assumption off of very little information. I mean, those are powerful messages that are usually intentionally sending a message. So it's a little more extreme. But you know, if like the example you said, if you're walking down the street and somebody
Mhm.
crosses the street
Mhm.
randomly, right? You can assume that that's probably based off of appearance.
Right.
This happened to me like as in my youth. I grew up in a very small town. We did
Mhm.
not have much diversity in any realm of the word. um, and I grew up learning that we would avoid people of color. We would avoid gay people, right? If I saw a rainbow flag, we just don't talk about that. Those are the gays, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I grew up thinking that was normal. And then I
Mhm.
moved to Portland, Oregon, and was very quickly corrected. I said a pretty racially driven joke. I mean, I was 18 at the time, just a zero exposure to any other cultures. And I said this joke, and boy, it was really poorly received. And I was
Mm.
so confused. Like, this made everyone laugh when I would tell it in Bend. So what happened? So
Mhm.
it's interesting though that you bring that up, because even just crossing the street, right, where it's it's a neural pathway that tells us that this is unsafe because of the previous information that we have, and that's our implicit bias, right? And that
Right.
every single person walking this earth has implicit bias.
Yes. Yeah. And just being vulnerable here, I'm thinking about the times where if I didn't know what to say, like, and I work in the DEI space with disabled people and I identify as disabled, but if I see somebody who's disabled and I'm not sure how to respond, sometimes I would avert my gaze when I'm not prepared to know what to do. And now I'm thinking, is that a microaggression? Just my avoiding
Hmm.
conversation, avoiding contact, or somebody who's asking for money when I'm at the car, like in the car at the stop sign. I see them, they know I see them, but I'm like pretending to be really looking forward because it
Right.
hurts my heart so much to like talk and have a conversation if I don't have change. And so sometimes I just look straight ahead. But is that a microaggression because I'm not treating them humanely like I want to by making eye contact and conversation, even if I don't have money to give? I
Yeah.
don't know. Now I'm questioning myself.
And that's good. I mean, that's we all have to do that. We have to question and challenge ourselves if we're going to change those
Mhm,
behaviors. And yes, I would say it's a microaggression, and
mhm,
it's not easy to face, right? Because these are just things that come naturally to us because of the pathways that are written for us. And
mhm,
really, I think what it boils down to is just exposure.
mhm,
If you don't know anyone with a disability, if you don't haven't interacted with somebody with a disability, then you are going to commit microaggressions. There's not really a way around it.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but you just having that conversation, though, right? Like you said, somebody with a disability, avert your gaze. Okay, I don't know what to say here, so I just won't say anything.
Right.
Well, I'll challenge you to say that. Like,
Mhm,
gosh, you know what? I'm so sorry to say, but I'm uncomfortable right now, and I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I apologize. I know that my body language has changed. I know that my eye contact has changed, and that's probably invalidating to you, and I apologize, but I'm going to work on that.
mhm,
Any
mhm.
amount of accountability goes a really long way. Just acknowledging it, verbalizing it, so that person knows that you're not blind to it, but it's something that you're going to work on, and that goes a really long way.
Yeah, yeah, which and it's a brave and vulnerable choice to do that,
Mhm.
but absolutely, that feels right. I think about in at workplaces and in business meetings, I identify as a neurodivergent person and autistic ADHD, and sometimes I'll make a comment during a meeting, and it's almost like an overly emphatic response. Good thought. That's really like interesting, if fascinating question. I'm like, no, what? Like it was literally just a question, but they like go overboard. I've noticed my supervisors doing this for a lot of the marginalized folks in my room. There's like, fantastic question. And it feels aggressive. It feels dismissive and aggressive, even though it's so kind, is what they think. Do you come
Yeah, no.
across that a lot?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's definitely that's not uncommon at all. And I witness it, and it happens to me if I'm in very straight spaces where I'm the other. Like I'm very, I'm gender queer. I don't present as cis, and people will be like, "Oh, you did a TEDx talk. Oh my gosh, what a huge, oh my, that's so amazing. I'm so proud of you." Like, and I'm just like, it's not like
It is
anyone can sign up for a
celebration.
TEDx talk. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, it's funny how like they go over the top to validate you, but that's really actually invalidating because they're acting like it was
Exactly.
an out of character accomplishment for you just based off of your demographic.
Yes, or telling somebody who's disabled they're so inspirational, just like
Right.
so brave for getting up every morning and living, right?
Right, like, and sure, they are, right? But
Mhm,
that's
mhm,
absolutely not something that you need to be bringing to somebody's attention on a, on a whim, right? If they said, "Gosh, today just getting out of bed was just so difficult, like I'm in so much pain," be like, "Gosh, but you did it. Like that was brave of
mhm,
you." And then leave it there,
mhm.
right? If the context calls for it, then sure, validation is meaningful, but don't go out of your way to call attention to it. Anyone with a disability is just trying to live life in a world that's not built for disability.
Absolutely, and this makes me think about intersectionality because sometimes we just speak to the identity that's the most apparent, right?
Hmm.
But we have so many different identities and parts, and So if I'm in a space where I'm presenting outwardly queer or with talking to my therapist, they're often looking only through that lens of queerness, but not looking through the lens of any of my other identities. And it could change depending on what space I'm in. But does that come up in conversation a lot, where the kind of most prevalent identity or the most apparent identity is the lens that people look through, and then all the others just kind of disappear sometimes or get like closeted or masked?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I see that in professional spaces too, right? Once you adopt an identity, or once you make public an identity, then that's what people are going to default to without asking, deeper questions like, what else do you like to do, right? Like, what else are you passionate about? What else drives you? So it's interesting though that our brains will take that information and just plug it in, and that's our default. That's what we fall back on.
Mhm. Mhm. And you mentioned implicit bias a few times so that the listeners can understand what that is. How would you define implicit bias?
Yeah, it's a bias that it occurs automatically.
Mhm.
It's usually unintentional or always unintentional, but it affects your judgments, your decisions, your behaviors. Um, like for example, what do you think about when I say somebody is a kindergarten teacher? Like you're going to picture a very specific.
I, I picture a young woman fresh out of school,
Yeah,
white.
absolutely.
He's white. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if I say cardiologist,
I want to say a woman of color, but that is not what the first thing that came to mind is, of
right,
course.
I know, because you're trying to
Yeah.
change the program, right? And because
Right.
anyone could be a cardiologist,
Of
it doesn't have
course.
to be a cis white older man, right? But all the
Yeah.
textbooks, right? And this is where
Yeah.
media, where our education system, social media, I mean,
Hmm.
everything that we come across it's bias. And when I entered the co-op, I mean, the co-op, it's a progressive place, right? Like we're striving to make change, be inclusive, all of these things, but still our training materials, if it's we showed a group of people and there wasn't a single unique or different skin color other than white. It was just a
Hmm.
bunch of white people. And so I went and
Hmm.
intentionally found more images of more diverse groups of people and was like, these are people, right? Like we're we're
Yeah.
we're running this program, and we're really we're building off of it. So unless we're starting to change those things at a base level with our education, with media, then it's not going to change very easily. We have to do it on an individual basis.
Yeah. That reminds me that only just a few years ago in OBGYN books was the first black fetus, like in the womb,
Hmm. Yeah.
an illustration in the book. And I was like, of course there's like, what, all fetuses are white? What are we
Right,
doing?
right.
But then
No,
but then
it's
it was
wild.
so interesting. Yeah, how I was like, wow, in 2020 or whatever year it was,
Hmm.
it's just shocking.
Yeah, we have
Um,
a long way to go. And it's on a
abs
fundamental basis. This is not, but it's the whole system. And unfortunately, that's a daunting task, but we have to have these talks. We have to be open to it. We have to have self-awareness to address them, right?
Yeah, and when we think about how we participate in the dominant culture, whether we know it or not, sometimes I'm always struck by the fact that the dominant culture, in terms of numbers, is actually not white. It's just that the white men have the power and privilege. So
Right.
sometimes when I hear dominant, I think the most amount, but that's just not true. So it's just fascinating that even as the world becomes more diverse, that it's still it's still
Right.
the cis white men who have the
Right.
power and the privilege in
So
general.
the foundation was built, right? The foundation is already there. That's why when I
Mhm.
talk about this, it is a systemic issue. It goes all the way to
Mhm.
the foundation, the core. We have to dismantle it all to really fix this on a societal level.
And what about for people who have had negative experiences? Like, I'll speak to my own experience. And I had some sexual abuse when I was younger. I experienced that, and by black men. And it took me a while to feel safe around black men.
Right.
because that was the image that was in my head and the experience that I had, and which felt like that goes beyond what was it even taught to me. It was what I learned from personal experience. And so that's not an excuse, but it's an explanation, right?
Right. Right.
And so I'm just wondering how you guide people through that process if they've had lived experience that they're trying to unlearn.
Right. I mean, and guiding somebody through a specific process, right? That is not something I'm qualified
Mhm.
for. But
Mhm.
when people come to me for advice when it along those lines of things, right, I just remind them that it is a neural pathway that's based off of a personal experience. Those personal experiences are really powerful. We're going to carry those with us. We're going to unintentionally place them in other situations that don't call for it. But I encourage people to it's about exposure. It's
Mhm.
about putting yourself in spaces with people
Mhm.
who match that description and teaching your brain and that neural pathway that that's not always the case, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's self-awareness, right? And if you don't have the self-awareness to understand where that's coming from, then you're not going to fix it, or you're not going to try or challenge yourself. So I would just say rewriting that neural pathway by exposure, by having a conversation with somebody, right? If you find yourself in a situation where somebody is sitting alone and they match the description of somebody that you have a bias against, then go ask somebody sitting here, do you mind if I sit? And just have a conversation with a stranger, right? We're taught not to talk to people, but we
Mm.
absolutely have to if we're gonna rewrite and change that exposure level and challenge those neural pathways and those implicit biases.
Without asking them or putting the responsibility on them to teach us differently. We're just getting that
Right.
exposure. Mhm. Yes.
Right. I'm not saying to to go and be like, what makes you a good person? Like just have a normal conversation
Yeah.
because your brain will automatically fill in the gaps of like, oh, that was a regular thing to say. Like this person has a job, this person has a family, this person drives a car, like whatever it is that your brain needs to put that person in the safe
Mhm.
zone.
Mhm. Mhm. And with intention versus impact, how do you know, how do you know what impact you're even if you've had good intentions, how do you know if the impact has been harmful or negative?
It's hard to know because unless that person is outwardly saying something, then you don't really know what your impact was. And
Mhm.
that's why I think it's really important um, to be empathetic on all levels. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes before you even say anything. If you're going to go talk in front of a crowd of people, unless you're intentionally including, you're going to unintentionally exclude. So make your intentions known before you even start talking. The intent of this sentence is to provide reassurance. If it doesn't do that, I'd really love it if you'd let me know. And
Mm.
then give that, right? And we have to do that at the beginning, right? It's going to get redundant. But to retrain ourselves, we have to do that. We have to do the little bit of extra work. And like you said, it's not anyone's job to educate us. But if we're making the attempt, if we're doing it on our own time and our own way, then we can ask that of people and they can deny it. That's okay too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That reminds me of the conversation I often have about safety, saying this is a safe space isn't necessarily true. Can't guarantee safety. We could say we intend this to be a safe space. And yet, lately I've been hearing, which is a really cool conversation, is does that take the responsibility and accountability for leaders to say, I can't guarantee a safe space, and then they don't try to create psychological safety
Yeah.
for everybody. So I like the idea of my intention is creating a safe space,
And and
so
and
that
then
the effort is there. Yeah.
right, and then opening the door to say, "If you don't feel safe, please come talk to me." Right?
Yes.
Because if it's not safe, somebody has to have somewhere to go to express that or to fix it. Like again, intention versus impact. Somebody might be intentional, their intention might be really good, and usually it is, right? People aren't
Mhm.
inherently evil. We're just trying to navigate, and that intention is usually pretty good. When somebody gives someone a compliment, oh, you're so well spoken, right? And in their head, in their mind, in their heart, that's a compliment, and they're
Mhm.
hoping that that's received as a compliment. But if that person is anything other than cis white, then they're going to take it a different way. So it's hard to navigate, but we have to challenge that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And have you found in workplaces when there are subtle acts of exclusion or microaggressions, like consequences? Have workplaces that you've ever seen held people accountable to those microaggressions, or they just kind of fly under the radar and nothing gets done?
Um, I'm sad to say that every single workplace, with the exception of the co-op, has not done anything about it. It's, well,
Mm,
they didn't mean any harm by it, so you just need to let it go. And that's how I was raised too, right? Like my mom, one of my family members would um, tell a woman of color, "Oh my gosh, I love your hair. It's so beautiful. Can I touch it?" Right? Like these are like over the top compliments in their mind, but in this person's mind with the curly hair, they're like, "This is not appropriate. Like this is a microaggression." And I remember
mm,
walking away from a situation like that, and my family member being like, "God, why was she so bent out of shape? I was giving her a compliment. She needs to let it go. She's being so sensitive." And so, I grew up with this like inherent microaggression that was, if as long as your intention was good, then it doesn't matter. It's the other person's
mm,
fault. And it's the opposite,
mm.
the total
Absolutely.
opposite. Like if the impact of what your comment was negative, then it was negative. It was offensive. You don't have any right to say otherwise. That person was offended. It's offensive. Period.
Yes. Yes. I've worked with couples where well, I'm thinking now, it was a queer couple, two women, and one of them was Jewish, and the partner touched her hair, and the Jewish woman said, "Don't touch my hair ever. That's a microaggression." And the partner was like, "What are you talking about? Like, of course I could touch your hair. Like, I didn't mean anything, but what do you," like, was adamant that there's no way that could have been a microaggression if it didn't come from a place of aggression or it didn't come from any intention. And this argument went on for weeks. They finally actually they didn't make it. Unfortunately, they split up. I don't know if it was only from that, but it was probably from the lack of communication. But I wonder how
Mhm.
much this plays out not just at work, but at home, with people who just don't understand or conceptualize or have the compassion or willingness to really listen, to the people they live with, and how much that doesn't create a sense of psychological safety in your own space.
Right. Well, and we're all stuck in our own echo chambers, right? And even
Mhm,
within our own minds of
mhm.
convincing ourselves of a story over and over. And then it's hard to rewrite that. But and that's where, self-education, exposure, we have to do those things. Or when somebody claims a microaggression, we're just going to deny it, right? We'll fight really hard to say, that's not what I meant by it. You're taking it wrong. They're taking it however they took it. There's nothing you can do about that. That just is.
Yes. Yes. It's yeah, it's a work in empathy, and humility. Yeah, and unlearning. I love the phrase I heard recently that the most important skill we can have is the willingness to learn and unlearn.
Yes,
You just need that
right.
willingness, the
Well,
curiosity and willingness.
and really, it's having self-compassion too, right? And it's a hard balance. On my own self-discovery, like my own self-healing and growth, and rewriting these neural pathways, I've come to realize that it's a thin line between excusing the behavior and giving compassion towards where that came from. And having that self-awareness building is the foundation, I think, of all of it. If you're not self-aware, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not questioning and challenging your own beliefs, then you're going to have a really hard time seeing other people's perspectives.
Absolutely. It sounds like you've tra- come a long way since how you were raised. So I'm curious what it's like to go home and talk to your family about microaggressions, and are they more receptive? Like, are they willing to learn, um, given all your now experience?
Ooh, I don't really. I have tried in the past, and with reservation, they'll take it. But it's more of like a pat me on the head and be like, "Oh, that's cute." Right? They choose to continue to live in their cognitive dissonance, and I can't change that. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people are right now. Is
Yeah.
they're just choosing to live in cognitive dissonance. They're choosing to ignore their implicit bias, and they'll just continue doing what they're doing, and they'll fight for that. And
Mm-hmm.
if they hear a challenge, then they say, "Oh, that's cute. Okay, let's move on." Which is,
Mm-hmm.
I've cut out the toxicity in my life, because if I can't change somebody's mind, if I can't influence somebody in a positive way, then it's just not worth my time. There are other people that I can be spending my energy and my time on to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I find it challenging when it is our own family and I want to stay
Mhm.
connected to family. And pretty sure the last time I had a conversation with my father about my DEI work, he goes, the problem in this country is that everyone cares about equity. I'm like, yeah, that's my work.
That's
It's just
that
and
is the problem.
he's like, and capitalism is dying. I'm like, you're saying that as if that's a bad thing, like a
Right.
polar opposite conversation.
Oh
But
my
that was
gosh.
his deep seated, rooted, whatever belief that I
Mhm.
at 75 years old, never going to change his mind. Well,
Right.
I'm the problem,
Yeah.
and so I'm just like, all right, I guess we're gonna just talk about food.
Right, right.
We're
Well,
gonna-
and that idea that family is everything, right? This drives me nuts, because some people don't have a healthy family. Some people are raised in houses of abuse from all angles, and they don't get to have family. So, people will say, "Well, just give them another shot," or whatever, without knowing the whole situation. And so we feel this pressure to bridge those gaps, when we're just inviting more toxicity into our lives, and more potential to revert back to those implicit bias programs, and you know um, those distortions that we create for ourselves on what reality is, if we continue to expose ourselves to that toxicity.
Yeah, yeah. And do you find I'm thinking through about networking events I've been through, and I still hear in theaters and networking events, ladies and gentlemen,
Mm,
which I find offensive as a queer person, but as a trans person, do you feel like that's a microaggression? I'm just curious how that lands.
I do, very much so. Pretty much every conference that I've been a part of, any public speaking event that I've been a part of or just attended, it's the default, right? It's what society accepts as the inclusive hello everyone. But why not just say that, hello everyone?
Right.
That's okay, right? Everyone. But
Everyone.
right, find the language that is inclusive, because like I said before, and I get this from, none of this information is my own, right? I've done the research, I've learned things from other resources, colleges, professors, doctors. I've done a lot of self-educating. That's how I come up with these, topics. But if you aren't intentionally including, you will unintentionally exclude. And it's something to just constantly tell yourself, in a professional setting, in a personal setting. And it's hard to do, but that's because it's not the neural pathway, it's not the automatic. And that's
Mhm.
something you have to work at rewriting. It's not easy.
Mhm. No, it's not. And it is a lot of work. I think about inclusive design coming from a place of honoring everybody. So, of course, that includes everyone with disability. And so, transcripts, if it's not already, built into your meeting, you might be unintentionally excluding somebody,
Right.
just as one example. And so, yeah, I think that's a really necessary um, field to expand this idea of universal design. I've heard it more inclusive design rather than
Yeah.
universal design. Uh,
There's this actually, that reminded me, I was in a board meeting the other day, and one of the members, we were just kind of introducing ourselves, and she said her name, and then she said, I'm female presenting. I have a gray beanie on. I have
mm,
a green shirt with shoulder length hair. And I thought, of course, like, anyone who has any type of visual impairment is going to have no idea what the people talking look like. And sometimes that's where we base a lot of our information off of, right? Like, it was an eye-opening aha for me to go, I didn't even think about that. So I was unintentionally excluding because I wasn't thinking about that piece.
yeah, and that's a beautiful thought because even if you look around the Zoom room or the Google Meet or whatever, and you don't see anybody in an apparent way that has a disability, and nobody's claiming or stating out loud that they have visual impairment, there's non-apparent disabilities all over the place, and that inclusiveness that they provided, I think in a way, like, it liberates other people to be able to be more inclusive, and it liberates other people who didn't have a voice to speak up. Somebody who had any kind of visual impairment, I would think, would feel a little bit more psychologically safe in that meeting to say something, to not feel invisible,
Well,
literally.
and they're not gonna ask,
Right.
right? Like, that's not a normative thing, and they're gonna immediately be, picked out of the group and then like, "Okay, that's somebody with a disability, let's do something different with them." And that's where that's just not it's not fair. That's not, inclusive, and uh, that's not creating a environment of equity.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh. Um, Yeah. Well, first of all, for anyone listening, 53-year-old white woman with sparkly glasses and wet hair because I just showered, wearing a green turtleneck that I regret because it is hot in this room. I'm sweating, and menopausal with a rainbow brick background.
Oh, I love it, and, I am in a, suit vest with a undershirt of purple and blue, and my background is my office, and I have very short hair.
Yeah. I am, the shirt colors are very vibrant, and
Thank you.
yeah, swirly. Love it. Love
Yes.
it. Very good. Well, this has been informative and humbling and empowering, insightful. So thank you so much, Rae. How can people reach you if they want to continue the conversation with you or work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few ways you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best, most direct way to get a hold of me. I believe that you're going to be including my
Mhm.
email address in our description, so you're
Mhm.
welcome to email me anytime. And I'm more than open for just conversation. If you want to work with me, I'm happy to do that. Definitely, definitely want to be as involved as I possibly can in this, and just continue making that impact.
Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you coming and being generous with your time, but also really patient and compassionate with the learning process, that it takes. Because if you weren't as compassionate, patient, and felt safe to me, I wouldn't have been able to share with you all the vulnerabilities that I did as I'm learning and unlearning in real time. So I appreciate that
Yeah,
about
of
you.
course. I mean, it's a learning experience for everyone, right? And I
Mhm.
didn't start this way, and I have to just give a little bit of vulnerability moment and just say that I haven't always been this aware. I have not always been a positive influence on people. I haven't been good to people. There's a lot in my history that I'm not proud of, but this is the work that I want to do to make a difference in other people's lives and to kind of correct some of those wrongs that I did. So
Mm.
just encourage everyone, self-educate, grow, learn, expose yourself.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rae, for being here. And
Yeah.
thank you, everyone, for listening. If there was a part of the conversation today that struck a nerve or touched you, or maybe you wanted to have a further conversation about it, please reach out to either of us or share the podcast episode with someone, and maybe have a conversation at home or work about microaggressions. And yeah, and of course, anytime you subscribe and review and all the things, that's super helpful because it gets the podcast out to more people. But feel free to reach out to me as well. PashaMarlowe.com is my website. That's the easiest way. And then I'm on all the social media as Pasha Marlowe on LinkedIn, and Neuroqueer Coach on Instagram and TikTok. So excellent. All right, Rae. Well, we'll talk again soon, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. I look forward to it.
Great. Thanks everybody for listening today. Happy neuroqueering.